SCTN presents This Week in Motorsports. It's a USAC showdown in California, and Mighty Midgets run for the money in Alabama. We'll learn that stock car racing's not as easy as it looks. And it's luck versus muck to avoid getting stuck in North Carolina. This Week in Motorsports is brought to you by Mr. Goodwrench. No one knows your GM car better than Mr. Goodwrench. No one. And by AluGuard. Look for and buy brands containing the AluGuard premium quality antifreeze formula. Welcome to This Week in Motorsports. Hi, everyone. I'm Pat Scanlon.
And I'm Mary Flannery.
The United States Auto Club's Midget Championship was decided this past weekend in Ventura, California.
With just 2 drivers in position to win the crown, several big names in the sport chose to race in Alabama instead.
Stuart Smith has highlights of both races, beginning with the USAC showdown in California.
With 2 races left in the season, the USAC Midget Circuit traveled to Ventura to crown the 86th champion. The night didn't start smoothly. Number 98, Mike Geringer, finds himself going end over end in turn 1. Defending series champion Mel Kenyon and 86 series point leader Rich Vogler didn't fare very well either. Both were unable to transfer from the semi to the feature. Vogler did have some consolation based on his points lead with just 1 race left for the 2 drivers. He is crowned the champion. In the 50-lap feature race, it was the Western States Series champion Robbie Flock on the pole with Stan Fox on the outside. Fox would power his way into the lead right off the bat and set the pace. The race was slowed several times by yellow flags. Wally Panquist brought out the first one on lap 5 with this flip. He was okay, but got an early call to the pits. On lap 28, Jimmy Burge joined him after this roll into turn 3. Chuck West got sideways coming out of turn 2, causing a minor traffic jam, but everyone was able to continue. Bad luck hit the Western States Divisional champion Sleepy Tripp as he gets the black flag for rear suspension problems. No bad luck for Stan Fox. He continued to handle the track with ease and was never in danger of giving up the lead. Rusty Rasmussen in the number 38 car gave it his best shot. Starting from the middle of the pack, he worked the outside until he could get into second place with this move past Robbie Flock. Flock managed to stay in third place despite a set of badly worn tires. Rasmussen continued his charge and once again tried the outside to get around Fox, but just didn't have enough left, and Fox went on to win the feature.
I could hear him. You know, he's working on the outside, and it's real slick, and I knew if I slid out there, he'd have me, you know. So I figured I'd just be patient, and I kept using a little more of the racetrack up. He'd slide up a little more and make it a little harder for him to pass, but the leader has the opportunity to go where he wants, and, you know, it was his job to get around, and I wasn't really too worried. I could hear him, but, you know, if it had been about 60 laps, he might have had me.
Midget drivers who knew they were out of the running for the points championship, such as Tom Bigelow, didn't make the trip to California. Instead, they opted to run the Southern Midget Outlaws contest in Phoenix City, Alabama, where a big check was more pressing than a championship. Another driver on hand, Bev Griffiths, was looking for her second USAC Midget career win. You may remember she became the first woman to win a USAC race earlier in the year at the Indianapolis Speedrome. At the start of the 50-lap feature, pulse hitter Jeff Lee lost his advantage over the field when Pep Marchesi bolts out into the field. The action was slowed down almost before it got going as Bobby Snyder brings out the first yellow flag as he finds himself dangerously close to leaving the track. Other drivers did find themselves off into the field. Dave Dwyers in the yellow number 2 car takes a brief excursion into the grass but recovers and returns to the action. He would have more bad luck later in the race. Using the yellow flags and taking the low side to his advantage, Ronnie Burke takes the lead past Marchesi. Tom Bigelow, starting in the 12th position, takes his cue and also gets past Marchesi, who begins to fade back. While Bigelow and Burke raced for the lead, Bev Griffith was having her problems. She eventually would spin out 3 times and be disqualified from the race. Todd Holderfield found himself taking a scenic route but was able to continue. Dave Dwyer, however, was not after this flip off the track. He was uninjured. Number 99, Kenneth Nichols, also left the premises on the backstretch. Out of sight, out of mind, as no one saw him leave the track. Nichols walks up to the track looking like a visitor from outer space and says, "Hey, where's the yellow flag?" The officials finally saw him and the yellow was thrown. Meanwhile, Burke and Bigelow put on a good show for the lead, with Bigelow finally overtaking him. While Bigelow put a lot of distance between himself and the rest of the field, the big race was for second place, as 3 drivers went side by side for several laps. Burke, Todd Holdenfield, and Terry Winery kept it up until Winery got the edge and pulled into second. Some great close racing by those 3 drivers, but no one was able to catch Bigelow. He just kept on cruising and took home the win. A great run from the 12th position for Tom Bigelow. In addition to racing midgets next year, Bigelow says he's trying to get a NASCAR ride. Stuart Smith reporting for This Week in Motorsports.
An impressive victory in his last finish put sprint car racer Mike Sweeney in good position to finish ahead of his arch nemesis, Eddie Worth. It happened at the 9th annual Don Peabody Classic in Ascot Park. As Steve Filmer reports, the 2 men came out of this race as even fiercer rivals.
Bubby Jones in the red #1 car won the pole for this 50-lap event, and in the early going at least, he had to work to keep it. Rivals Eddie Worth in the number 77 car and number 91 Mike Sweeney both came to this race locked in a battle for second in the points standings. They wasted no time in mixing it up on the track. Just 1 lap in, and Sweeney steals past Worth on the outside. Worth fights back on the inside, but it's not enough, while Sweeney's nipping at leader Bubby Jones. Rip Williams in the number 37 car gets torn up on the back straightaway in lap 2. That brings out the yellow flag early. At the restart, it's Worth, Sweeney, and Jones, but not for long. Jones slingshots back into the lead, but has to fight off the challenge from Sweeney. Jones is able to stay in front by himself and begins lapping the field until Ed Reed spins out and slows down the action. At the restart, Jimmy Oski's number 0 car is suddenly up near the leader, and just as suddenly out of the running along with Jerry Meyer. With just 6 laps left to go, Mike Sweeney makes a final charge on Eddie Worth. Sweeney just can't make it happen. Worth holds on to second for the race and for the points standings, while Bubby Jones in his big lead take the checkered flag. Steve Filmer reporting for This Week in Motorsports.
Coming up on This Week in Motorsports, we'll introduce you to the Superboat champion in offshore racing.
And the Willow Springs Formula USA Championship is decided.
'79 Cadillac Fleetwood, '83 Buick Riviera,
Mr. Goodwrench has the parts.
Pontiac Fiero GT,
Parts for virtually every GM car on the road today.
Olds Cutlass Cruiser,
Genuine GM parts, the kind GM cars were designed to use.
GMC Jimmy 4x4,
So if your GM car is worth taking care of,
'69 Z28 Camaro,
take it to Mr. Goodwrench. No one knows your GM car better. No one.
This liquid can help keep your engine running cool, prevent corrosion, keep it from boiling over or freezing up. What's in it? Aluguard, a premium quality antifreeze formula approved by all 4 major U.S. car makers. Aluguard, a formula you find in more than 70 brands of antifreeze, but not in Prestone. The label tells you it's car maker approved antifreeze. Antifreeze with Aluguard. Available now.
Every girl at any age would love a beautiful white iron and brass bed from Blacker Furniture. These beds come in many different styles and many different price ranges. Here are just a few we'd like you to see. If you need 2 girls to share a room, or if you have a girlfriend staying overnight, you can add a pop-up unit that works this easy. And now you have 2 beds. Our white beds begin at only $99. Come see our big selection at Blacker Furniture on the old highway between Ogden and Brigham City.
Blacker Furniture, home of the summer.
If getting by isn't good enough, if you know what you want, then find out how to get it here on the Weekend Wall Street Journal Report. The kind of reporting you depend on during the week from the reporters and editors of the Wall Street Journal, now on television. Information that affects your bottom line on the Wall Street Journal Report, because your money matters.
Sunday afternoon at 5:30 on KOOG Channel 30.
The Formula USA Motorcycle Championships concluded this past weekend at the Willow Springs International Raceway in Rosamond, California.
As Steve Filmer reports, a season-long battle for the championship came to an anticlimactic finish.
Until 2 weeks ago, this race was to be a showdown between 2 riders. Earl Roloff on the right hand of your screen, the former USA champion and the California state champ in '83, and Jim Vreeke. He's the one with the broken hand suffered in competition several weeks ago. And with the broken hand and some busted ribs, Ricky was forced to watch from the pits. That meant that Roloff was already champion without having to race in the final event of the season. With all the pressure gone, Roloff said he would still drive just to see if he could win his 4th race of the year on the Formula USA circuit. At the start of the race, it was Chris Stewart out in front with Doug Poland in second. Poland, who had had a great year of racing, including wins at Daytona and Road Atlanta, slowly brought the reins in and passed Stewart on the backstretch. It was a big pass since the race was only 20 miles in length. Poland didn't take any chances either, pressing on to build up a very comfortable lead and win over Stewart and the rest of the riders. Meanwhile, Roloff was content to ride in 3rd. The championship had already been locked up after 10 very competitive races.
That's real good. It was a long season and a tough fight. It's too bad Jim couldn't have gotten out here today to have it out that way, but we just rode real consistent and we won the thing. Get out of here. Come on.
Roloff will be celebrating for some time to come. His number 2 plate now gets switched over to number 1 for the '87 season.
In motocross action on the West Coast, the big story centered on Russ Wageman. The Continental Motorsport Club's Night Nationals at Ascot Park turned into a thriller during the second 500cc moto. While in the lead and on the white flag lap, Wageman dumped his bike and quickly fell back to 7th place. He got back on his bike, though, and made a wild last-ditch ride that paid off. He ended up second to take the overall win. Jeff Matievich got the overall win in the 250cc event, while Willie Surratt took the 125cc title. Meanwhile, a 5-hour mini boat enduro sponsored by the American Powerboat Association this past weekend in Parker, Arizona, was shortened by high winds. The race was called off after about 2 hours because of those weather conditions of the Colorado River. Mitch Lemke was declared the overall winner as well as the Division I champ. Over 80 boats were on hand to compete in that event.
For many boat racers, the dream is to run the big boats in offshore competition. Al Copeland had that dream several years ago, and as Steve Filmer reports, not only did Copeland reach his goal, he's now the world champion.
For Al Copeland, competition is the spice of life, whether it's the Cajun flavor of his multi-million-dollar Popeyes restaurant chain or the pleasure of offshore powerboat racing. Copeland skippered the Popeyes Diet Coke ship to the 1986 World Cup Offshore Championship here at Key West. Every bump, every jolt of this choppy course is just another thrill for Copeland.
It's exhilarating. It's a great feeling. It's exciting. Yeah. What the unique thing about offshore racing is that every wave's different. The next wave's a different challenge. You know, you never know. You run along in 3 or 4 foot seas and there's a big dip out there, and you hit one that's 5 or 6. And it's coming from different directions. Every time you turn, the water's a different way. It's not like running on a track or anything. It's always different.
Copeland is a seasoned winner, not only in this sport, but in $400 million worth of Popeyes restaurants. It's his winning ways in the business world that are paying for his powerboat racing. Copeland travels the circuit not only with the boat, but with a yacht, a helicopter, and this fully appointed luxury bus. In powerboating, as in business, Copeland is an innovator.
We started talking about, well, why can't we build a boat that's big enough and long enough and put 4 engines in it instead of 2 engines and be able to bridge the gaps between the waves and maybe run fast in rough water, or reasonably fast in rough water, and real fast in calm water. And that's how this evolved from that ruling. And then we built the first superboat, and a couple other guys started building them after us, and it just evolved and evolved and evolved.
The price tag on this 50-foot Cougar catamaran, $600,000. But for that price, Copeland's getting plenty of bang for his bucks. Powered by 4 fuel-injected Mercruiser high-performance engines, this boat will deliver 3,000 horsepower and a record 130.401 miles an hour. With that kind of boost behind him, you might ask who Al Copeland worries about seeing in his rearview mirror. The answer, Al Copeland Jr., his son and now his closest rival. Al Jr. fell short of beating the old man for the title race by just 0.13 of a second.
This was his first year. He did real good. I'm real proud of him. And I got to say, it sometimes scares me. And I worry about him more than I worry about me, because I'm confident about what's going to happen with us. But I do have to say that there is a risk out there for him, and I'm concerned about it. But he does it well. He's done a good job, and each race he does better and better and better, and I'm real proud of him.
And when the 1987 offshore racing season starts, look for this fast food mogul to keep serving up those fast finishes. Steve Filmer reporting for This Week in Motorsports.
Next on This Week in Motorsports, Randy Pemberton takes us through the Buck Baker Stock Car School of Driving.
And we'll take you to mud bog action in Charlotte, North Carolina.
We are plush vans, sleek Suburbans, exclusive crew cabs, exciting Astro vans, and introducing Team Camaro. We are Choo Choo Customs, the power and the glory. Choo Choo Customs conversions are available only at your local authorized Chevrolet dealer.
This liquid can help keep your engine running cool, prevent corrosion, keep it from boiling over or freezing up. What's in it? Aluguard, a premium quality antifreeze formula approved by all 4 major U.S. car makers. Aluguard, a formula you find in more than 70 brands of antifreeze, but not in Prestone. The label tells you it's car maker approved antifreeze. Antifreeze with Aluguard. Available now.
If you live in or near Ogden and would like to supplement your income, the NICE Corporation would like to talk to you. The telemarket industry is expanding, and we need people with good verbal and minimum typing skills immediately. The NICE Corporation is a nice place to work. Gain valuable computer experience while enjoying flexible scheduling with 24 different shifts available. Part-time work ideal for students, housewives, or anyone who could use extra income. Come in for an interview Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at 4357 South Airport Park Plaza in Ogden.
This is 6-year-old Emily Johnson. Emily lives in Ogden and has a liver disease that requires her to get a liver transplant. According to her doctors, Emily must have the transplant within a few months or face certain death. However, transplants are expensive, and Emily's family can't afford the procedure. Won't you join us at Channel 30 in helping Emily? Send your donation to the Emily Johnson Trust Fund, Valley Bank and Trust, 2910 Washington Boulevard in Ogden, 84403. For more information, call 626-9623.
The Coliseum at Charlotte, North Carolina was packed this past weekend, packed with mud bog fans.
A sellout crowd watched high-powered machines matched up against mud. A lot of mud.
As Barbara Sheridan reports, it was a night filled with just about everything.
A sold-out crowd showed up at the Charlotte Coliseum for the mud bogs, but for a while the trucks would have to take a backseat to another kind of mud matchup. These people were selected to try their luck with the mud and without a truck. The prize at the end of the bog, cash in a 3-wheeler. With that in mind, everyone began moving through the muck as fast as possible, which at times was out of the question for several of the contestants. I doubt very much if this will ever become a national pastime. A few seem to have the right method to move through the mud, with this contestant having a comfortable lead over the rest of the field to win the bike and bucks. While he was getting his prizes, some of the other runners were still trying to get out of the mud. Finally, with some help, that was possible. Then it was time for machine and man against mud, and the mud more often than not was the winner. Here's a few highlights of how to and how not to get through a mud bog. Randy Cantrell was the overall winner in the 3-wheel competition with rides like this. He would cap it off with this wheelie and dump. Onto the stock trucks that really didn't fare much better. And just when it looks like you've got it beat, the engine says no more. John Craig drove his truck to victory in the stock class. There were some successes. Dick Wilson in the A-Team truck just blows through the mud en route to victory in the modified class. But for the most part, the mud had the last word. Then it was time for some driving lessons. Gary Porter in the Carolina Crusher demonstrates to the fans how to get out of an overcrowded parking lot. He then shows them how to get into a crowded parking lot. How many times have you needed something like that during the Christmas rush? There was more car crushing to come, and David Mace had the perfect machine for it. Called the Virginia Beach Beast. This This truck doesn't stop for anything and doesn't care what it does to any vehicle. Including itself, as Mace loses one of his windows on a return pass. The two machines would meet again later in a challenge match, as the Virginia Beach Beast has a healthy appetite for mud and roars through the muck with ease. After the challenge came the Carolina Crusher, and while not as fast as the Beast, does get through the muddy mess without too much difficulty. On to the experimental class. John Runner in his 57 Thunderbird just flies through the mud in just 2.97 seconds. Runner also drove his Black Magic machine to second place. He was one of the more fortunate ones. We'll be bringing you more mud bog racing action from Ascot Park in Gardena, California next week. Barbara Sheridan reporting for This Week in Motorsports.
What a wild time. I would love to drive one of those trucks. It would be messy, but a lot of fun.
I think you fit the type well. Sit in a cab of Bigfoot and just roll right along. A little muddy, but I think at one time or another, every motorsports fan wants to do some driving in a racing machine.
I think you're right, Pat, and I have the answer. A 3-day course at the Buck Baker Driving School in Rockingham, North Carolina. That could fulfill that dream. And our Randy Pemberton jumped at the chance to prove his skills, or lack of skills, at the school.
In a 3-part series beginning this week, a brave Randy Pemberton takes us through the program.
If you've ever dreamed about being a professional race car driver but just never knew how to really get started, this could be the answer. I'm at the North Carolina Motor Speedway, where Buck Baker, 2-time Grand National Champion, conducts the Buck Baker School of Driving. I'm going to go through the school and tell you all about it. It's 9 a.m. in the morning of day 1. 10 aspiring drivers, including myself, are anxiously awaiting the chance to become the next Richard Petty or Buck Baker of stock car racing. School director Steve Porter begins with the basics. How to properly get in the race car, grip the wheel, shifting, being aware of all the necessary gauges, and being aware of what all the flags mean. This preliminary introduction to the sport enables everyone to become comfortable with the car to the point where you feel part of the machine. With that behind us, Buck's son Randy takes over the instruction. Chassis setup is discussed so we all have the understanding of how a Winston Cup car is set up. With the classroom instruction done for the day, it's time for our first track experience. Buck takes each individual out for several laps around the track, explaining what lines to take and where to run. The moment of truth finally arrives. It's time for all of us to actually drive the cars. When it was my turn, I found myself thinking about all the instruction earlier in the day. After strapping myself in and checking the car over, it was on to the track. Once I began to drive the car, everything that I had been taught came together. I had a great time circling this track. Rockingham has a history of not being kind to drivers, but after a few laps, I was really comfortable with the whole idea, realizing that it would be a lot different with Dale Earnhardt or Tim Richmond running beside me. After running about 25 laps, which seemed like only 2 or 3, I got the 1-lap sign to come in. My brief experience in one of these cars was a dream come true. I can't wait for tomorrow's instruction. It looked and felt easy, but it's really not. Buck had us out on the track under ideal conditions. No traffic and no hazard conditions to spoil your day. Next week, I'll show you what happens on day 2 of the 3-day school as Buck Baker throws a curve at us. And just when I was beginning to think I could win a Winston Cup race. Randy Pemberton reporting for This Week in Motorsports.
Next week, we're going to take a look at how the class does on skid tests. But still ahead on This Week in Motorsports,
a look at some of the greatest machines in racing history.
Hi, I'm Mr. Goodwrench. I was GM trained in Chicago.
I'm Mr. Goodwrench. Got my GM training in Terrytown, New York.
No matter where he lives.
Phoenix, Arizona.
Portland, Oregon.
Mr. Goodwrench can get something not just any mechanic can get. GM training.
Got my GM training in Oklahoma City.
I was GM trained in Atlanta.
GM has training schools all over America.
Miami, Florida.
Buffalo, New York.
Memphis, Tennessee.
So no matter where you are.
Houston, Texas.
No one knows your GM car better. No one.
When you need
to go to work on mornings like this, it's nice to have a Honda parked in the garage. No matter how cold it gets, you can depend on a Honda to start. The Honda Snow Thrower. It's even got track drive, so you won't slip or slide in deep drifts. And at half a ton a minute, you might even get to work on time. Because at Honda, good things run in the family.
Get all your Honda power equipment at Dave Power Equipment, Roy and Layton.
There's a new burger in town. It's a quarter pound of beef, crisp lettuce, fine ripe tomatoes, a slab of cheese, a special sauce, and crunchy golden brown onion rings. Ooh-wee, what a treat. Try one, you'll love it. Special premiere of the new crunchy onion burger, only at Warren's Drive-Ins, South Ogden across from Newgate, and Roy across from Harmon's. By the way, the price is righteous.
Weber State Basketball announces lower prices and better seats. The lowest prices in years. Only $45 for season tickets and the best available plastic seats. Just $80 for new cushion seats in side sections. The Wildcats have been picked by every national magazine to win the Big Sky title. So be there on December 1st as Coach Larry Farmer's incredibly quick Wildcats take the court. Call 626-6500 to order your Weber State Basketball season tickets.
For the next 2 weeks, we'll be bringing you This Week in Motorsports from the Bahamas.
The first Grand Bahama Vintage Grand Prix will be held for 10 days in the islands beginning this weekend.
Here's a preview of some of the cars that will be racing through the streets of Freeport. Those cars have that classic look about them. I can't wait to get down there and see them firsthand.
You are going to have a great time. I am so jealous I can't go.
I promise. All right. We'll tell you all about them in a couple of weeks.
Oh, Pat, your old heart.
Meanwhile, that's all for this week in motorsports. Next week, we'll have day 2 of the Buck Baker Driving School, as well as the Bahamas Vintage Racing.
Plus, more Mud Bog Madness, this time from California, and Enduro action from Connecticut. I'm Mary Flannery.
And I'm Pat Scanlon. We'll see you next week on This Week in Motorsports. This Week in Motorsports has been brought to you by Aluguard. Look for and buy brands containing the Aluguard premium quality antifreeze formula. And by Mr. Goodwrench. No one knows your GM car better than Mr. Goodwrench. No one.
The drama of the 1972 Munich Olympics comes alive again in Visions of 8 on KOOG. It was a year of triumph for the winners and tragedy for the Israeli athletes. The intense competition is revived in Visions of 8, Friday at 7 p.m. on KOOG Channel 30.